Greetings everyone, Brad here with Mild-Mannered DDC. Today we're going to do a review on a knife that has really been one of the more fun knives I've carried in the last little while for sure. It is the Pocketknife Marksman. That's right, the Pocketknife Marksman. And it comes in a couple styles, a couple flavors, and we'll talk about that. In fact, I think there's even a second iteration of this. Yeah, this thing is just really interesting and cool. I know it's not the newest knife out there, but it's one that I actually had not had a chance to handle. And so one of my buddies, Mark over at the Knife Collector, check him out over on Instagram. Beautiful posts and some really great gear. And it's just really gracious of him to give me an opportunity to check out his Marksman. So anyways, with that, thank you, Mark. And let's go ahead and get this underway. We're going to do a classic mild-mannered review on this particular knife today. So when we do a classic mild-mannered review, for those of you who are new to the channel or anybody just needs a reminder, we talk blade, then we talk action, then we'll talk scales and hardware, and then ergos and carry. But before we do that, let's go ahead and get started with a spec check, and then we'll do a couple size comparisons. So, spec check on this knife. We've got a blade length here of 3.5 inches. We've got a blade thickness of 0.12 inches. We got a handle length, when it's all closed up, of 4.75 inches and a handle thickness of 0.48 inches. And that's about here, I think. I think it's probably a little thicker up towards the top of the strong lock. But yeah. And then a weight. Oh, I'm sorry. We'll do an overall, when this is all opened up tip to tail, of 8.25 inches. And then a weight of 4.30 ounces. So it's not the lightest knife out there, especially considering the scale materials. I was a little surprised by the weight, but that's all right. Let's go ahead and do a few size comparisons. So there you go. I've got the Buck Marksman against compared to a Benchmade bug out. How about here I keep wanting to call it a Spyderco because, yeah, it's not. This is my Ontario Spidey Rat. It's a Rat number 1. How about I have to keep pausing when I do that because I keep catching myself. That's how good BJ's work is. There you go, mild-mannered Swiss Army knife. So, I mean, a pretty medium-sized knife, maybe a little on the larger side with that 3.5-inch blade, but yeah, pretty cool. So let's go ahead and get into this review. So let's talk blade. Very, very cool blade. This particular version is blacked out, but that's all right. They come in a variety of other, I think, a satin. They come in a standard, I think, sort of drop point. Yeah, a couple other variations, like I said. I think this particular one looks quite cool. So there you go. So on this one, you've got a Tonto and a hollow grind, which I love. It does, like I say, have that black PVD coating and a steel of 154 cm. Important to note on this steel, and Buck Knives is renowned for this, particularly for their 440 that they use, but they utilize the expertise of Paul Boss. You see his logo there, who is, I think is renowned as one of the most, one of the best heat treaters in the game for blade steels.
It's science.
So this particular knife in 154 cm, which is a great blade steel, one of my favorites actually, and heat treated by Paul Boss. So a lot to like there about that. Now, as I mentioned, you got a hollow grind, you got this Tonto. I'm not a huge Tonto fan, but I think on this particular knife it looks quite good. But like I said, you can get them in other variations. This is very sharp. I don't know how much Mark had used it or not, but it came quite sharp. Has this nice, interesting little kind of swedge or cutout here up at the top. I don't know if you can see that. It doesn't go the full length. Yeah, not a dainty tip or anything like that. So, pretty darn nice. No real chamfering or anything other than that up on the top. Also no jimping anywhere to be found. The sharpening choil done pretty darn well. Maybe it could have been, I don't know, it's done pretty darn well. It's basically right at the end of the plunge line there. So now there is some blade marking on here. You've got the Buck logo. You know, maybe you like that, maybe you don't. And then you've got the G&G Hawk collaboration, the 154cm, the Boss logo. There's a lot going on this blade, and particularly since it's black, it really shows up. Also got a little number up there. You know, I don't know. I don't know that it actually bothered me all that much. In fact, I don't think it does. But I can see how people might find that a bit cluttered if they prefer a more sterile blade look. So yeah, there you go. But overall, this was a really nice blade. You know, it wasn't my knife, so I didn't want to use it and abuse it too much. But I did use it. He did give me permission to use it. But yeah, and so I used it for some basic tasks and did some cardboard and a couple of little things. Even did a little food prep with it. But yeah, so since I'm here snapping this thing away, let's go ahead and get into action, which I think is, in my opinion, and I think in many other people's opinions,
these ain't opinions, these are facts,
the best part of this knife. This is just a cool action. So you'll see here up on the flipper tab, the jimping is right up here. So it is totally meant to be, it's even almost kind of, you see how it just sort of dog legs up a little bit. I mean, it's totally designed to be light switched. Like that. And boy, does it just fire out. I mean, it is just beautiful. Just a beautiful action. And not only that, but the close action on it is equally smooth. And yeah, I mean, I couldn't believe it when I first got out. I just went, whoa. So not only can you use the flipper, you can spidey flick it there or finger flick it, depending on what you want to call it. And then, or you can, oops, failed it, thumb flick it as well. And I didn't use the thumb as much. I tended to finger flick or use the flipper tab. But yeah, very, very well done. So the action on this is really pretty phenomenal. I like it a lot. Now, this knife features, and you saw that on the blade, and I think I mentioned it briefly, the G&G Hawk collaboration. So that is Grant and Gavin Hawk, who make some amazing, amazing knives. And they collaborated with Buck on this to install what they call their strong lock. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's their strong lock system. That's right. And this lock does a few things. So it does take a little bit of getting used to. So it sort of operates like a back lock because, as you can see, when this opens up, it catches. Let me do that a little slower for you. So you open it up. You can see here where it catches that piece right in there. And that keeps it quite secure. And the way you undo that is you kind of lift it up and then it falls shut, right? But as you're using the knife, you're basically pushing down on the locking mechanism as well. So, I mean, it just adds an incredibly strong feeling of security, and I think security in reality when you're talking about how good this lock is. Other thing that's interesting is you can actually unscrew these top screws here, and you can adjust this bar a little bit to get it just to the right tension that works for you. And you can see there's a little divot, well, a little I don't know, depression there that adds the spring and rigidity. Now, it does take a minute or two to get used to how you pull this back to disengage. And it's not always super simple, or it's not always, you've probably seen me fumble with it a couple times in this video. And in fact, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Scorpion lock on the AD10 as far as how you kind of have to actuate it to get it closed. I have tended to use my index finger to kind of pull it up on one side, and that's what lets it drop. I suppose if you have bigger hands or you're more capable than me, you could use two. But regardless, I like it a lot. It becomes pretty intuitive once you figure it out, and it's just really enjoyable. And I just tell you, I mean, the snappiness of this is just so fun. Not only that, but it's got a really, really nice detent. I mean, it's in there. It's got a really, really strong detent, which is great, but not overly strong. I mean, it's just dialed in perfectly. So that's great. Centering is just about dead on perfect. And as we mentioned, it's got a unique locking mechanism on it, which is pretty cool. We'll talk about the bits on this a little when we get into ergos and carry, but it's a little bit rough here on the edges. To provide you that grip that you need to close it up. But And I know some people don't like that. And I think in some other iterations, they've gone to smoothing that out a bit so it's not so aggressively ridged or jimped or whatever you want to call that. And I can see that, to be honest with you. In fact, I think there's a version of this called the Gray Ghost, which has a G10 and a much more rounded, smoothed off element of these. And I actually was looking pretty hard at that Gray Ghost after borrowing this one. It looks really cool. And I think I may end up just picking up a Marksman because this action is just too darn good. So anyways, so there we go. I've probably gone on and on about the action there, but I think that featured with the strong lock system and everything else, it just makes out to be the focal point of what's so cool about this knife. So let's talk scales and hardware. So we've got aluminum scales here, and as you can see, they're grooved out, milled out in an interesting pattern to give you a little bit of texture. Everything's actually it's smoother than it looks. It looks like these would be edgy and might, kind of dig into your hands or something. They don't. It's actually quite smooth. And in fact, the ergos in general, and when we get to that, we'll talk about it, are quite nice. But yeah, no, the aluminum scales here, again, blacked out. Now, like I mentioned around the weight being 4.3 ounces, it's a little heavy considering this is aluminum, but I think some of that's the back lock, and it's got this pretty hefty end piece kind of down here. So yeah, I mean, I think on some level, yeah, there's just a little bit of something there, but yeah. And then you've also got, obviously, blacked out hardware and this blacked out pocket clip as well. So that's kind of what we're sitting here on scales and hardware. Now, let's talk about ergos and carry. We already kind of touched on that. The ergos for me are really, really good. I really enjoy it. I mean, it just fits my hand perfectly. You can just see how that, ergos are great. And you can do a little bit of choking up. I mean, beware of the edge of the blade there, but you can do some choking up, and you can choke up this way or do a pinch grip or however you want to do it. But yeah, overall, I found the ergos to be quite nice on this particular knife. Yeah, so I enjoyed the ergos quite a bit. Now, or at least the ergos for me worked very well. Now, I did mention there's a little, interestingly, during carry, this didn't really play in too much for me because either my thumb was sort of on top of it or off enough to the side where I didn't get that rough. That part didn't bother me from a ergo standpoint. Like I said, I know it bothers some, but didn't really bother me too much. So there you go. I think that's worth noting. Also, everything's well chamfered here, so there's really no shop spot. And the clip, this is a beautiful clip. I mean, it's a really, really well done clip. And that gets us into carry. So let's talk about that a little bit. As you can see here, from a carry standpoint, slides right in, very deep carry. You do have a slight logo there. I don't know if you can see that. Let me see if I can. Is flashlight dead? Oh, there you go. I got a dead flashlight. That's classic. I think I loaned that to one of my kids. That would explain that. So there you go. But there is a slight little logo there. I don't know if you can see it, of the buck anvil. There you go on the light. But yeah, no, very deep clip. The other deep carry clip. The other thing that's pretty great with this is you can take those two little screws off and switch it around so you have a reversible pocket clip for tip up carry. It is not tip down carry, but it is tip up left or right. And for lefties and righties, this feels like an extremely ambidextrous knife because of the locking mechanism and the way you can actuate it with finger flick or obviously with a flipper tab. So very lefty friendly, which is great. So, what are my thoughts kind of overall on this? Well, you know what? For 150 to 120 bucks, I think this one pushes that 120 mark. Maybe slightly over 120 depending on the variant you get, but right around that range for a USA made knife with this really creative, interesting locking mechanism, a fabulous heat treat, a good steel. This is really an all-around really excellent offering. If you're looking for an EDC that just looks really good, has an amazing action, an innovative and strong lock. It's not just the name. It is indeed, I think, very, very strong. And it's just fun and fidgetable and a great tool that'll meet your needs. This is really a really, really excellent offering, especially if you're looking for something USA made that isn't going to completely break the bank. In fact, I think this is almost at that price, I feel like this is pretty hard to argue with. Now, I know a lot of folks don't like aluminum scales because they tend to show some wear, etc. But, you know, if you can get past that, and again, like I said, I think there's a G10 version out there somewhere. But by and large, this was really, really a fun knife. I really appreciate Mark giving me the chance to take a look at this. And like I said, I think I'm going to pick one up for myself just because I enjoy it so much. And it's just such a good tool and just really well made. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed this review of the Buck Marksman. Great knife, great knife. My hat's off to Buck and G&G and the rest of them for really putting a great knife together. So with that, stay safe out there. Be mild-mannered to one another. And all the best.